But like if you're starting out and you're mostly writing for websites and you're, you know, you're not like sort of grandfathered in at some rate, I don't know how you can make a living at this unless you're doing like constantly churning out shorter pieces. And then that's great if that's what you want to do. For me, like that's not what I want to do. And so, you know, I don't actually know anymore how you make a living just doing long form
I don't know how you
journalism.
can do good work at those rates. So this is like a story from real life. I write for Nat Geo and print, but they asked me to do something online, and they're paying me $1 a word, and they want 1,000 words. But I've spent so much time on this story. It's such a complicated story that I've probably worked 80 hours just doing the research, and writing it. It was another, 2 days, and I just feel like I can't do any more reporting for the story because I know it needs more reporting. It's a very complicated story, and it deserves more space, and it deserves a lot more time. It can be done in 1,000, but it's just like I don't have any will to do it because the rate is so low. Spread out? And that's a high rate for online.
My first magazine job in 1980, we paid $1 a word.
For print.
And $1 was worth a hell of a lot more back then.
My first story was $1 a word.
I mean, when I went freelance in 2000, I feel like it was rare that you would get paid less than $2 a word. Like it was like really questionable if you were not getting paid $2 a word. And now when you tell young journalists starting out that, they're like, what? That's insane, $2 a word, like that's unheard of. But I don't see how you can really like make a living making less
unless
than
you
that.
just write very superficial stories and just keep churning them out, but that's not journalism to me.
I think the only place that still pays $2 a word is AARP, the magazine.
Great.
You reach out to them.
Well, I mean, your book, a lot of the content in this, you first sold as magazine pieces? Or
no.
They came out afterwards in magazines?
The stuff that I ended up... So they said, we want 80,000 words. And I gave them 130,000 words, and they said, no, we said 80,000 words. So a lot of the excess stuff I managed to chop up in pitches, magazine stuff after the fact. Sorry.
Yeah, but I'm just because I know one way that some people help make this work is if you can sort of write magazine articles that then will also come out in a book.
Right.
It makes the two things a little bit more.
Yeah, I was writing some magazine stuff while I was writing that book, and I also lucked out with my advance. It's not I can't expect that again in the future. So for me, also, it's like that helped me over for a few years, and this program's helped me over for a few years. But it's definitely a gamble that I'm taking, that when all this journalism stuff shakes out and then all the people who weren't serious enough about it sort of fell aside, and I'll be like the last one at the musical chairs thing. It's not a like smart way or financially secure way to plan your life.
Well, actually, I'm just going to interject one thing, and then we'll get to you. But so I'm, as you know, I'm actually working on a book right now about Mars and Martians, and the scientists who 100 years ago thought, in fact, that there really were beings on Mars. And so I was just doing some research on H.G. Wells. And after he wrote The War of the Worlds, in 1898, he got a letter from a young writer who he was an aspiring author and was asking for advice about how to get into the business. And so basically what H.G. Wells said is that to become a writer, talent isn't enough. You have to be dogged and willing to endure years of failure and poverty. And he added another consideration. He wrote, for this guy to consider, are there any people dependent or likely to be dependent upon you? This is an important consideration. It goes without saying you must, if you start to be an author, stay celibate until you succeed.
Wow.
So that was his advice.
I think he's absolutely
Pretty much how I got here.
That's
We have an author.
I'd like to invite everybody to get to the optimistic part of the exciting new world.
Is that what it is?
But we all know these stories are out there.
Yep.
They need to be told.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be a mechanism, as you just all outlined. Where's this go?
I mean, where do we go with environmental coverage in particular?
In particular, but the business of informing people about the world around them.
There was lots of startup small online, there's this whole ecosystem of smaller, they don't pay very well,
Right.
but there's, I mean, other people here can speak to this, but grant-funded journalism and foundations and lots of synergies between different groups, like the Water Initiative, the Water Desk. So I think that's where journalism's going. People who share, I work for the Food and Environment Reporting Network, and we partner with media publications, and we help supplement writers' fees so that they can publish in places that don't pay that well. So I see hope there, and if I were starting out today, it looks very different, and I feel lucky that I started when I did,
Right.
But I don't think that hope is all lost. It's just moving to this nonprofit and sharing kind of model.
Yeah, I think that's huge. The nonprofit thing it's exploded recently. When I was at Yes Magazine, we were struggling. Like the magazine had functioned for 20 years, and then suddenly we were starting to see we were starting to feel the impacts of the low readership and the low subscription rates, and we were struggling before Trump was elected. And after Trump got elected, it was like money was just falling out of the sky. Trump had a huge impact on the nonprofit media scene.
Well, because it's a nonprofit, and it gets donations from readers.
Yeah, there's donations from readers and grants.
Mother Jones too, that way?
Yeah,
Right?
a lot of progressive media has just been boosted by this Trump.
Even
thing.
like, I mean, the New York Times and the
Washington
Washington
Post.
Post subscriptions
Oh,
are
yeah.
up. I mean, I mean, I don't.
People care
value
again.
there. Yeah.
I do think, I was thinking about this the other day when I lived in New York, and people would always ask me like how to find an apartment in New York, you know, because it's just this arduous, like terrible thing to try and find an affordable apartment in New York. And I was always like, there's not like any one route to getting an apartment in New York. Like you can't really say like, yo, just do this and you'll be fine. But everybody like ultimately finds one. And I kind of feel like this is the same thing, you know, like somehow
Well,
I'm still
yes.
here, and I'm
but
actually
but
like.
there are a lot of people who don't live in New York. They've decided to, you know, they've
Right,
moved
exactly.
to Ithaca,
Right,
or
whatever.
they've gone
Right, or
someplace.
right. So maybe you somehow find your apartment in New York and you make it work, or maybe you're like, oh, I don't actually want to live in New York
And you
after
get a
all.
PR
And I feel
job.
like,
Or you go and be a public information officer at an
no, but I do,
environmental group.
but I feel
There's
like
other
I
writers
do-
do other things.
That's true. Writers do other things, but I feel like if you wanted, you know, like you can be the like, you know, last man standing. Or I do feel like there's some, well, like Peter, you know, like he's going to take the last chair. I'm going to take that last chair.
Yeah, no, you're gonna fight me first for that.
I'm blown away by the two of you because you have children. I seriously,
Yeah.
to me, to be a professional freelancer, I am just the idea of trying to find health care as a professional freelancer, and let alone
Yeah.
an apartment. I mean, I'm not going to stay in Boulder very long as a freelancer. Are you kidding me?
Right.
So where are you going to end up? Who knows? I don't know, like Iowa. So
Homestead.
to have to raise a family as a freelancer, and you know, given all those constraints, it forces you to make decisions that you would make differently if you had not chosen this path.
So are you filled with regrets? Do you
No.
wish you had some other skills?
No.
Yeah, because it's so
Very
fun.
It's the
talented.
it's
Let's
the only
not
thing.
be.
It's great.
He's oozing with talent over here. Don't
What's
let me
that?
fool you. I said Steven's oozing with talent over here.
But I think if you want to do this and you're passionate about it and you're committed to it, like you will just find a way to make
Just
it
gotta
work.
find that way.
You
Yeah.
know, like that's what it's unfortunate
Well
that like
said.
that's what
You'll
it's
wait
come to. But I
tables
feel
and-
like you know, I mean, like you know, you've like found all these creative ways to make it work.
Right.
Like I just think you kind of it's forcing all of us to be a little bit scrappier and more
I would-
creative. But
I would say one piece of advice that I always give. I talk to students and have a youth leadership camp every summer in Atlanta, and one thing I always tell them is the rule of proximity, and how I learned that a long time ago, and that's how I ended up pretty much at CNN and here today.
What do you mean the rule of proximity?
Being in the
So,
right
so if you can't work doing the thing you love, work near the thing you love, you know, or the thing you think you want to love or do.
Well, you mentioned you were a tour guide.
I was
at
a tour
CNN.
guide, yeah.
And was that with the idea that you wanted that?
Yes,
that
so
was like
they
starting in the
hire
mailroom,
they hire
you
tour
wanted-
guides with the intention of them moving on up. In most cases, there's some lifers there in the tour guide office maybe who would just enjoy it, but I originally applied for their what do you call it, video journalism program. I don't think they call it that anymore, but it's basically a PA production assistant training program. You're running scripts, you're getting coffee for anchors, you're doing all kinds of things like that, menial tasks that matter, but they're small tasks. But work near where you love if you can't get in, because what will happen is you'll be able to pick the brains of the people who are there and be able to ask them these questions on a regular basis and really offer maybe some skill that you have that's not being utilized in that proximal job.
Well, and those of you who are freelancing, have you thought about going back to or going to a full-time job with benefits?
It's like I dream about it every night.
Yeah. Seems
Yeah.
sort of dreamy.
Yeah, well,
Can I do it from home?
yeah.
That's the question. Is, can you get the remote work?
The idea that you could walk into an office, sit down, stare at a computer, and just get paid for doing that for like hours. I mean, it's you might not do anything all day, but you still get paid.
Wow.
It's astonishing.
It's astonishing.
It's a lot more than that, but as someone who recently came out of the corporate media full-time world, I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of not necessarily transition into freelance, but utilize that as a tool in my tool belt versus, like, there are parts of my journalism that I feel like are journalistic career that need to be exercised on a regular basis, kind of like how you felt probably when you were editing. I spent a lot of time as a researcher and worked with editors, sitting down, hoping and wishing to get out in the field and do the work that I was listening to and reading on a regular basis and editing and researching. But there's something to be said about getting in that corporate mode. You get complacent. You get to the point where you're like just waiting for the next thing to happen, or just waiting for the next assignment to come down your pike, or and there's nothing wrong with that because you're producing something, but it kind of speaks to what Elizabeth was saying. Like you're kind of tasked with doing these shallow, kind of here they come, there they go kind of stories versus what I like to call real journalism.
Well, so I mean, it sounds like basically you all are having to put yourselves out there and make it happen, right? I mean, you're not just, you are getting calls from National Geographic, which is great, but for the most part, if you want something to happen, you've got to just find a way to make it happen.
Yes.
So to what extent do you feel like you have to kind of market yourself? Do you all have websites? Do you need to have a presence on Twitter? Is that part of how you're establishing yourself as a journalist people want to hire?
I think, Peter, you're the most out there in terms of social media presence of all of us.
I don't know about that.
You get in arguments with people about deep space stuff on Twitter, so that puts you.
Wow,
that puts you
you're
out
clapping back on Twitter now?
Oh yeah, a lot
Wow.
of hand emojis.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I hate Twitter and I hate the internet, but it actually has been quite, like, I grudgingly admit that it has been useful in my career. So I found my book agent through Twitter, and I've definitely spread word about the book through Twitter. So it can be useful, yeah, but if I could wave a magic wand, which is still silly to say because I could delete my account tomorrow, but if I could get rid of one thing in my life, it'd be Twitter, just because the conversation tends to be really shallow and it can be really distracting, and but I would say that it has been useful in my career. And like if you manage to weed out the really annoying stuff, I do get story ideas sometimes because I'll follow some small community that's sort of just talking to themselves about the latest advances in their fields, and I'll find story ideas that way too. So it's not all bad online.
I used to spend I used to be pretty active on Twitter for a while, and I feel like it was really beneficial to my career. I met a lot of people that way, a lot of
But you're
editors, a
not
lot of
anymore?
scientists. Partly it's having a little kid, but partly like when Trump was elected, I just
It got a lot worse.
I couldn't deal. I didn't want to be on any platform that he was on. I just didn't want to deal, and so I kind of.
And do you feel it's hurt you that you're not so active?
I think it probably has hurt me. I mean, it has not hurt me in my soul. It's actually helped me.
I would say it's hurt my soul.
But I just feel, I do feel like it's probably hurt me in some way, but I don't care right now. I might, maybe after this fellowship, I will choose to be more, to engage again, but I just really needed to, disengage.